Welcome to the first day of the rest of your lives. You know, that when I hear that phrase, I was thinking about the other day, and I'm like, is that phrase really good? Because it sounds a little cheesy. It sounds a little personal development-y or something. It sounds a little, I don't know. I was thinking about it. Does it sound cheesy? But when I think about that phrase and I think about where I heard it from the first time, it just like strikes a chord. Because it was like, that is what Don Howard said to us right before we drank the Wachuma.
Yeah, it's right before the Wachuma Mesada initiation, which is an incredible experience. Don Howard is like probably one of the
He's
top,
a master.
world top masters of. I mean, there's no hierarchy, but he's been doing it for so long, right?
Yeah, and it's funny too because it's like after you have that experience, you definitely do see the world in a different light because it's weird. It's like you look at everything in so much more vivid detail. It's just like everything just pops and is alive and like it's insane. So it's weird because it does make you see things differently from that point on because it does stay with you, just remembering that experience.
Right. I mean, and actually, it's funny that you mentioned that because today I was thinking about just when we were going to the podcast and just my opening. I usually say, "Hey, thanks for joining us. Welcome." Da 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 da. I was going to say something along like, you know, where are you in the circle, in the cycle, in the wheel? Because that's another part that Don Howard would talk about. He talks about this wheel that like where are you getting on and off? Where are you?
Yeah.
Where are you in that wheel of life? These cycles of everything that seem to be on every scale of our
And
of our
where are you in
existence.
space and time? You never know who might be listening to this, when and where, and you know, and it's out there in the internet.
Absolutely.
Forever.
I mean,
So-
we do have people listening in like different continents. We have Africa. We have quite a few in Europe.
Yeah, a lot of London,
Asia,
England,
Australia,
London.
U.S. for sure.
Yeah.
And so for everyone that's listening to this abroad and participating, so cool. Welcome. Thank you. We've never really formally acknowledged you, but I do see you in our statistics. So
Totally.
it's pretty awesome.
And the odd comment here and there, which
Totally.
we appreciate for sure.
Yeah.
But let's get on with it. Yeah, it's interesting, man. Going back, when I think about that experience, and I was just reflecting on that the other day. I'm like, should we open with that? And I'm like, yeah, it's good for me. It's significant for me. But I thought maybe I put a little context for people listening today.
Right. Welcome to the first day of the rest of your life.
Yeah. And of course, my name is Andy Zaremba, or at Andy Zaremba on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And with me behind the helm today is my brother Mike.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Super happy to be here, as I always say. But yeah, as per usual, we're podcasting here at a float house at 70 West Cordova Street. Floathouse.ca is our website. And we have actually a brand new franchise just opened up in Abbotsford. So Abbotsford
Floathouse Abbey.
Floathouse Abbotsford is owned by a very lovely couple. The gentleman is actually a surgeon, which is really cool. So it's just nice to see people in the medical profession not only just like acknowledging that flotation therapy is legitimate. This gentleman is actually, you know, investing in it. He really believes in its therapeutic properties, and you know, just he wanted to be involved on a more intimate level. So check out Floathouse Abbotsford. They're just up and running now, and I know they have 5 amazing pro float cabins, which are spectacular floating devices. They're actually like a cabin style, where at ours we have the tank. In Victoria, they have the pods, and now Edmonton and Abbotsford decided to go with the cabins. Ultimately, each device has the same purpose. It's designed for maximal sensory reduction, but you know, they just have a different aesthetic appeal. Some people, you know, they like having that volume in the tank just to feel a little bit more comfortable. That's where the cabins are really beneficial. The pods are very aesthetically attractive. They're kind of sexy. They look like an egg or a suppository. And you know, and then we have the tanks.
That's a good visual right there. Wow, that's our advertising.
I thought I was going to keep rolling with that. I didn't think you guys were going to jump in there. And then we have the tanks. You know, and tanks are kind of like the traditional sensory reduced environment, sensory deprivation tank. You know, that's what
I prefer the tank. You know, to me it goes back to Lily, and I'm like,
right.
When I bring it back closer to Lily, and personally, I do like the enclosed space. I find there's more consistent temperature because it's easier to manage that space.
There's pros and cons to all of them.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to all of them for sure. But give me my tank, man.
But
I
you
want
know,
the tank.
and ultimately though, when you are inside any of the devices, I mean, it should be pitch black.
Yeah.
And your visual interpretation of the space is exactly the same. So it's really like a quite a, you know, something on the outside that really more superficial, no offense, that people kind of are drawn to, the volume. Because when you're inside, it's all the same.
I mean, there is some bells and whistles, but
That's true.
as one of the former interests in Float House said at the beginning, you're not trying to sell the steak, you're selling the sizzle. Or don't sell the sizzle, sell the steak. And like sort of the bells and whistles are the sizzle, and like the steak is like, okay, how good is the quality of that food?
Totally. And that's and that's what we really definitely focus a lot on in Float House as best we can, is like, how dark is it, how quiet is it, how's the buoyancy, how's the temperature variations, and all that kind of stuff. So we really kind of dial in, and then even micro adjust for each individual. We can like modify the temp a little bit, and that's part of the learning curve of floating, is to like know what parameters and what variables work best for you and your body and your mind and your practice. So that's long-winded there, but check out floathouse.ca and use the promo code Vancouver Real, and you'll save 20% on a single float. So come check it out.
Yeah, I'm going to buzz through these next ones because that was an extended float talk. So also we have the Vancouver Real community. You can link up with the Vancouver Real community page on Facebook, or you can go to vancouverreal.tv and stay up to date on future events. We haven't had an event for a while, but we will get those going again as soon as our community managers are back in town from Bali.
Well, and we do have the one event for we're doing a collaboration again between Ontogeny, Vancouver Real, and Float House with Dr. Carlos De Leon. He's been on the podcast twice. Super fascinating guy. And this event,
totally worth going to.
April 11th for a couple hours. He just kind of gave a lecture on shamanism, actually. So he comes from a background of multiple esoteric disciplines. He's studied a lot of different things, and he kind of just brings them all forward and does different workshops and teachings and lectures and stuff like that. And he's a really, really interesting guy. And honestly, he's legit. Like, there's no snake oil that I can smell with him. I mean, you have to be open-minded, of course, but like, there's nothing that I can really
I don't think my
there.
bullshit meter does not get triggered at all with him. One of my favorite talks with him actually was when the story that he gave on the last time he was on the podcast, which we haven't released yet. It'll be in a couple of weeks or maybe a week or so, but it'll be released by the time this one's out.
Yes.
But go check that one out. He tells the story about how he was in Mexico and basically was allowed in by a secret society of shamans who taught them their ways. And he's got some pretty incredible stories about that. So definitely check that one out.
So April 11th, check it out. There's an event page, Ontogeny, ONTOGONY, on Facebook.
And of course, a shout out to Mindful Mass. It's Vancouver Meditation Mob. If you just search that on Facebook, you'll find the group, and we'll accept you and join us for a flash mob meditation. We don't have one scheduled as of right now, but we will be doing more
sometime in the spring,
throughout the year for sure. Or you can go to mindfulmass.org.
Awesome.
Yep,
Okay, let's dive in.
Let's dive in. So I'm really excited about today's podcast.
Me too.
Because, well, this one's been a long time in the making, and you've been definitely asking for a little while to be on the podcast, and we couldn't make it happen for different reasons. But I'm super stoked to have my friend and partner, Dave Weale, in with us today. So welcome to Vancouver Real.
Thank you very much, Andy. Stoked to be here.
Yeah, well, I think I met you for the first time at Toastmasters, Vancouver Entrepreneurs Toastmasters Club.
Way back.
And then we had a meeting at Save On Meats right over across the street, and I was chatting with you, and I'm like, this dude seems legit. That's all I could say. I was just like, this guy seems to be walking the walk. And one thing I've always been super impressed about you is that you are continually moving forward in your life, and you're always striving for improvement. You're always striving to maximize yourself. And that's definitely led you to your latest endeavor, which is, of course, the Grind Bar. And what's the website again? It's
thegrindbar.com. And by the time this comes out, we'll have our new website out, which is going to be groundedcbd.com.
groundedcbd.com. Yeah. Amazing. And well, I've been watching your progress over the past few years. We were in a men's group together for a while, and we got to know each other very intimately in that group. Not in a weird way, but in a very good way.
Kind of in a weird way.
It's weird for normal people, but for us, it's kind of normal, I guess, now. But yeah, man, it's been great to watch your growth and progress over the year. And I have to say, the product you've created, the Grind Bar, is phenomenal. Like, I'm not eating it at the moment right now because I'm doing a ketogenic diet, but normally it's part of my routine, and I'll have one almost every morning. Yeah. Why don't you show the folks what the Grind Bar looks like there?
It's this guy right here.
Yeah. Cool. It's an awesome endeavor, and I guess total transparency, Mike and I also invested into the company because personally I was just like,
Which was very appreciated.
It's a small startup, but I'm like, that's how much I love the product. And I did it solely on the fact that I love the product. It's great. I use it all the time. I get amazing results. One of my personal favorite uses of it is actually going to the gym and having a grind bar about an hour and a half before and then having a coffee. That combination, your workouts are through the roof. But
awesome.
Anyways, long-winded. But yeah, man, it's good to have you here.
Yeah, I'm stoked to be here.
So why don't you take us back to the beginning of like you decide. Let's go further than even knowing
Like
what you wanted
when
to do.
my mom met my dad beginning.
Well, I don't know if we need to go that far. I mean, I know you actually have some pretty awesome stories throughout your life. You've done a lot of different things, and you have some pretty incredible
There's been
stories
some
as
good
well.
Adventures for sure.
But what is it about you that decided to go that entrepreneurial route? Like it's definitely a harder route. It's definitely more risky. Some people are find it much, and this isn't a judgment. This is just it is safer and a little bit easier to work a job, right?
For sure.
Why did you decide to go the entrepreneurial route?
I would say I've always been one that thinks a bit outside of the box. In back like high school times, I was really into skiing, but I was also really smart. I was accepted to go to school for mathematics, go to University of Waterloo, but instead I chose to move to Whistler and chase dreams of becoming a pro skier. And that was my life for a long time. I lived in Whistler for 11 years, skiing and coaching and doing that whole thing. And so I've always kind of been pretty okay with danger, like because of jumping off cliffs and doing that whole thing for a living.
Yeah.
And but the entrepreneurial piece, it was kind of involved then because I was like still creating my own destiny. But when I started focusing more on business was actually after completing the Landmark Forum and getting into their stuff. That was the first thing that I just saw that like, I can create whatever I want. Actually, you actually get to choose how you live your life. So that was, and from there, I tried my hand at quite a few different businesses along the way, but as you said, entrepreneurship is hard, and most people that do make it fail a bunch of times before they do. So,
or they fail and fail, and sometimes they don't make it.
Yeah. So, but the people that do are usually, not usually, the ones that actually are persistent and keep fucking swinging and just keep going.
Totally.
Sorry, I swore.
No, you
That's
swear.
okay. We're already explicit on iTunes.
You got to be serial
that E.
serial failures basically to make it eventually.
What's interesting
you
is
learn so much
yeah.
every time you fail. You learn what doesn't work. You learn what doesn't work in business. You learn what doesn't work for yourself, and you take all those learnings and they harden you up as well and teach you
better.
that swinging and trying things isn't that scary, isn't that hard.
Yeah.
So
totally. Well,
it's not going to kill you.
I like how you mentioned how you had sort of a breakthrough at Landmark, and there's all sorts of personal development courses out there. I've taken one with PSI seminars, and some people, you could say what you want about these courses, and they might be a bit controversial, or there might be some things that you don't like about them. But for the most part, the people who go through them get enormous benefit. So it's like, that's why it's one of those things where some of the practices that they do, I'm like, I'm not so big on, but a lot of people go through there and have tremendous results with it. And you've been on that personal development path for quite a while now, right?
Yeah, that was my first like real entrance into that world. But once I got in, I was hooked. Basically, I was definitely a personal development junkie for quite a while.
Yeah, and that's one of the traps too, right?
Oh yeah, especially I find some are like different than others, but I see a lot of people in Landmark that just get totally. You get so addicted to this like high energy, high vibe kind of feeling of being in the courses, and there's all these possibility and all this cool stuff going on, but then they don't actually go out into life and do anything with their life. And that's at the core of it. That's what they're for, is to like, they're training so that you can do your life.
Totally.
And it's,
I think that can be the trap where it's like, if you keep doing course after course, or like volunteering or whatever it is you're doing, you feel like you're accomplishing stuff, but you're kind of not.
Yeah.
I mean, but again, like for me,
the same happens with school though. People get trapped into being a student forever.
Totally. Yeah.
PhD after PhD.
Yeah.
And just like never going and doing anything.
And it's because they don't really, they get stuck. They don't really want to go out into the real world for whatever reason. So it's not exclusive to those type of groups, but it does happen like anything.
Oh, yeah.
But it can be a springboard into something better for sure.
Well, and just kind of elaborating a bit more on that topic, it's kind of an interesting topic, I think. And, I think it's really hard for people to decide to make a decision on what to do and to find your purpose and to find your passion, to find your why. Like, those are super hard. Like, and I think it's something that's continually ongoing and evolving anyways, right? So
it evolves.
It makes a lot of sense. Like, it's like, at least you're doing something, but, in terms of like taking that action step towards your dream or whatever that is, it's hard to get clarity on that. And I personally struggle with it even now at different times. You know what I mean?
Well, especially today, like there's such a prevalence of anxiety in our society, and there's this pressure to like get it right the first time. So many people think, and that's, I think, one of the benefits of trying and failing things is you learn that it's not like, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to do it. And then you figure it out as you go, and you course correct and you get better and refine, and but if you never take action, you never learn what works and what doesn't, and you're just stuck in this like analysis paralysis, trying to like figure everything out before doing anything.
Well, Jordan Peterson says this really well. He talks about this with the self-authoring program, and you could use this for almost anything. He's like, start something and just do it badly.
Right.
And then you have something, and then what you do is you go back and you start editing and tweaking and improving and making it better. And I'm sure that process went on with the grind bar when you were creating that for the first time.
Oh yeah.
Like, I'm sure that you didn't get this final product the way it is now, dialed as it is, when you made your first batch.
Totally. Far from it on the first batch. The recipe actually came together pretty quickly. It's definitely like tweaked slightly and refined over time, but the packaging for sure. Like at the beginning, it was hand rolled balls and Ziploc bags.
Right. I remember that. Yeah.
I very much took on the kind of lean startup model when I was getting going with this. Like, what's the like simplest, easiest thing that I can put together with what I've got access to right now, and get it out there and sell it and see what people like.
Yeah. So that is what you just kind of summed up there is the lean startup model, right?
Exactly.
Creating the minimal viable product and then pushing it out. And if it seems
and
to
then
have
refine
progress,
and refine and refine and refine. I was just like
and then
continually
scale, potentially.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of at that point now, is looking at getting more into scaling, but it took a while. Like, it took a while just to go through all those phases of getting better and better and better and better packaging until it was something that I was comfortable, I was comfortable releasing like into stores, and stores are comfortable carrying.
Yeah, well, one of the things I do like about you and the product especially is the attention of detail you put into it, because it's really high quality. It's maybe you could tell us a little bit about the ingredients in it, some of the what you put into it, and
and what they do. Yeah.
For sure.
And eventually, and one of the pluses of the grind bar as well that everyone's very interested in.
Definitely. So, quick rundown on the grind bar. Basically, I made it for myself. I do a lot of hiking. I do a lot of like playing outside, and I wanted something that was actually going to fuel me and give me quality fuel to go and play and enjoy my adventures, basically. So it's fully organic, all gluten-free. It's also fits into the kind of bulletproof coffee or ketogenic style of eating, of being very high fat and low sugar. And how I did that is, it's got hemp hearts as the first ingredient, so lots of natural protein and fat from there, as well as anti-inflammatories. Then there's almonds, cashews, and cacao butter to really load up with natural protein and high fat. And then we use a little bit of dates and maple syrup for sweetness, and coffee and raw cacao and maca, which all help to kind of boost mood, improve like your hormone balances. For guys, maca improves testosterone. Girls, it helps regulate their sex hormones and stuff. And then they all as well help to boost energy, of course. And then a little bit of maple, or a little bit of vanilla and salt for flavor. And that's it. We don't use any preservatives. There's no fake anything. Like, everything on the ingredients list, you know what it is. You probably have it in your house if you're a health junkie like we all are. And then the plus, which you'll see on the side there, we do have regular grind bars out there, and the new grind bar plus, new, not new, the original, which then got re-released, but that's another story, which is for the CBD. They also contain 10 milligrams of hemp-derived organic CBD in each bar as well, which I'm assuming we're probably going to get into that conversation today, but 10 milligrams, if we'll talk about what CBD is later, but that dose of CBD is a very low dose, which is meant to help with anxiety and focus and just helping people stay. Not that we're making any health claims, but it's
anecdotally.
Anecdotally, yeah, that's what I use it for. Like initially I created because I found CBD helped me a lot with anxiety, and I wanted to make something that gave that to everybody else. So
Yeah.
it's meant to be a get shit done bar. Like it helps you get in the zone, stop worrying about stuff, stop like second guessing yourself, and just take action.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's
Well,
kinda
I'm a
it.
big fan of the CBD plus, the CBD bars, so the plus bars, and I do like. I find there's a nice sort of anti-inflammatory effect I get with my joints. I find
Totally.
my joints, like my knee. I had my knee, surgery when I was 16, so it's kind of getting a little bit worn and lots of wear and tear on the body. And I find when I eat it regularly, my joints just feel better.
Yeah.
And I like how it also is complementary with the bit of caffeine that's in there. So you get a nice little bit of energy, but it does level it out so you don't get jittery. It's really interesting.
Totally. And while there is caffeine, there's only 22 milligrams of caffeine per bar, which is about a quarter of a cup of coffee. So it's like enough that you're going to feel it and you get a little bit of a boost, but it's not so much that it's, giving you this big spike. And as well, because it's same with the bulletproof coffee style of doing things, because of the high fat, you don't get this quick spike. It's like a slow up, and then you just kind of like peter, and then slow down. Like you were saying, you have it about an hour before you go to the gym. So it takes a while for it to kick in, but that's pretty normal.
And for those of you that don't know, like CBD is a cannabis-derived product, however, is non-psychoactive. So you don't get any effect like that. You don't get high off it at all.
No.
But there are a lot of claims.
Careful. It's not psychotropic.
Psychotropic?
Yeah. So a lot of people actually make that mistake in wording. Psychoactive is just anything that affects your brain. Coffee's psychoactive. Alcohol's psychoactive.
Good point.
Tobacco's psychoactive. CBD does affect your brain, but it just calms it down. Psychotropic is like the high, the kind of disoriented, like any kind of hallucinogenics can fall into that category as well, which THC can be in very high doses.
Interesting. I like that distinction. It's good. What are some of the sort of the health claims around CBD or some of the benefits of CBD right now?
How much time you got?
45 minutes at least?
I joke. There's a lot. It's, the big ones it's being used for that are, the really like the ones that you can't ignore would be epilepsy. If that's the main one. That's where it first kind of started gaining prominence, was with this little girl named Charlotte down in Colorado who there's a whole story behind CW hemp and, this strain that this girl was having 300 seizures a day.
Whoa.
Like a day. That's multiple seizures. That's like a few minutes between. Like she didn't have a life.
It's terrible.
And then CBD oil without making her high or anything. And this is a little girl. They gave it to her, no seizures. Maybe like one a week kind of thing. But like it gave her life back. And there's still like
debate.
There's still debate whether it has any medicinal value at all, which is fucking crazy.
Yeah.
But so that's one of the big ones. It also helps with stress and anxiety. Those are big, obviously. Inflammation, anything. Like who do you know above 35 that doesn't have some pain in their joints? Like especially people that like to play and work out and live active lifestyles. It's good for asthma. It's good any inflammatory disorder. It's really good for it. Man,
I saw this amazing video online. You probably saw it too, where I think it was the gentleman had Parkinson's, and another gentleman had Parkinson's, and the one guy was showing him how to use. I don't know if he smoked cannabis or if he gave him the oil or what it was. I feel like it was something under his tongue, but. And he, Parkinson's, you're shaking quite a bit. These types of tremors, right?
Yeah.
And he had it, and then I think within like a minute, they did a little quick time of like a minute and a half or 2 minutes, and then he was just like calm, and the tremors had stopped, and it was incredible to watch and just to see it in real time, especially with somebody trying it for their first time, and then he got to kind of express how it felt for him, and how relieving it was.
Yeah, there's so many neurological disorders. Cancer is another big one, obviously. THC and CBD are both used heavily in cancer treatment. There have been studies that have shown like reduction in cancer like tumor size
Have
with
there been
cannabis.
actual studies with that?
Yeah.
Really? Because I've seen
they
things
don't-
at dispensaries where there's like a pamphlet saying like, here's the tumor before, here's the tumor after. But it's like, is there actual research backing that?
Yeah, like I actually interviewed a doctor on my podcast, CBD Radio, and he talked about the whole process of like what's actually going on. It's one of the few substances that can cause, I think it's like cellular apoptosis or something like that, where it actually triggers the cancer cells to just explode and commit suicide.
Is that the
basically.
THC or the CBD?
That's
Or maybe a little bit of
it's
both.
combination. I believe it's from mostly THC for that, but CBD is also used in post-cancer treatment, or especially dealing with the side effects around going through chemo and things like that. It's just, I haven't been through it myself, luckily, but your life sucks when you're on chemo, and it helps to restore appetite. It helps to just make you more okay with your situation, which is. It's really important.
And it kind of goes to, this all sort of alludes to the bigger question of like, why it all became illegal and why there's so much red tape around everything. Because, if you want to compare just two substances, alcohol and cannabis, you know what I mean? It's really, really hard to say that, it's fine for alcohol to be legal the way it is and cannabis not to be. Like,
it's fucked.
I mean, that's just a very basic general argument for it.
Tobacco,
but there's so
even.
many
There's,
arguments for it.
There's first off, I can rant for a while, which we probably will, but I would definitely recommend for anyone who wants to learn about all this stuff. There's a bunch of amazing documentaries like The Union and The Culture High
those
that
are
we
awesome.
can
Really good.
link to in the show notes, I'm sure, and they do a much better job of explaining. And the CNN documentary on weed, just called Weed, they really unpack the Charlotte's Web story in that one. But it's control. The main reason why it was first made illegal and is still currently illegal was back in the Reagan days. There was all these hippies protesting the Vietnam War, and
I think it was Nixon.
Nixon?
Yeah.
What did I say?
Reagan.
Whoops. Yeah, sorry, my bad. Nixon, that's what I meant.
When he announced the war on drugs, the famous speech.
Exactly, the war on drugs. And there's people protesting the war, and they couldn't arrest them for protesting, but they made weed illegal, and they arrested them for smoking weed because they were all smoking weed, because weed often makes people more in favor of love and of togetherness and
openness,
and sees the that whole thing that fighting and these wars are fucking pointless.
Yeah, part of the argument there too was that they're also targeting like the black community as well.
That was the first time.
Was it the first time?
It got made illegal the first time, ironically for the exact opposite reason, because a lot of the African Americans were smoking weed and they wanted to be able to hold them down, and they were saying at that time that was when the reefer madness thing came out.
I thought that was because of the Mexicans, that they claimed that Mexicans
it was both Mexicans and Native Americans were smoking weed, and they said it was making them crazy and would make them kill people and stuff.
Yeah, that was the first bit of propaganda.
Yeah,
but I think the
second time was for
like
being
hippies,
too loving and hippie and all.
Because there was a lot of social upheaval at that time.
Oh yeah.
So they went after. Actually, Mark Hayden broke this down really well. As I think the first time he was on our podcast, if you want to scroll back a few episodes and listen to Mark Hayden, he's the chair of MAPS Canada. He goes into depth about why it was actually prohibited in the first place.
Yeah.
And it's it really, because they couldn't go after them for protesting what the things they were protesting, so they went after the substance that they would use.
Totally.
Yeah.
Go after the substance, then you can arrest the people when you don't have to talk about what they're protesting.
But that time
you just shut them up.
There was also the whole the Pablo Escobar thing going on at that time, and I think that also prompted Nixon's, or was that earlier or later?
I don't know.
That might have been Reagan.
As I said,
But,
the movies do a much better job of unpacking it, especially
Yeah.
The Union. That's the one that really goes into the history of it and what's kind of how it started. The Culture High is more why it's still, because there's two questions. There's why was it made illegal, and why the fuck is it still illegal when there's so much evidence behind it being this really powerful substance to help people.
Yeah.
And the Culture High really digs into that, and that's a much more complicated thing that involves big pharma and the governments and control, and there's a lot of stuff going on there. But
I'm happy to just acknowledge that finally in Canada that legalization is happening, and what that looks like we don't exactly know 100%
there.
yet.
Yeah.
But to me it's moving in the right direction. So
Well,
there's so much bureaucratic red tape that you have to go through when going through a process like that. So the fact that it's happening in a relatively short amount of time, I feel like is a good thing.
Yeah, it's good that it's happening. It's it is in a way sad that it's taking as long as it is, but the bigger a ship, the longer it takes to steer. And the government is a pretty fucking big ship. So it takes time for it to kind of change course and implement all these new policies. And most of the people that are making them aren't as open-minded as we are. So they don't necessarily understand. Like, the rules are being made by people that don't even have maybe never even smoked a joint in their life or seen anyone that's benefited from using CBD. So it's kind of hard to, even though the evidence is there, it's not being like shoved in their faces necessarily. So
Right.
it's but it doesn't change the fact that there are, we live in Vancouver. We're in BC's the hub of Canada for cannabis, and Vancouver's the hub of BC. So, there's probably over 100 dispensaries still in the city, that city limits, that are openly defying that law and getting business licenses to do so.
Yeah.
In some cases.
Well, it was really interesting how that happened for people not living in Vancouver listening to this. It's like, basically the VPD came out with a statement saying they're not going to really enforce cannabis crimes anymore within Vancouver. So the police said that we're not going to enforce it. Technically, it was still illegal, and then people just started opening dispensaries like crazy. And it was the Wild West of cannabis. Really, is what it was.
Yeah, like
And
5 years
it still
ago.
is.
4 years ago.
It's tightened up a lot since then. Ever since they brought out the actual business licenses for dispensaries and had that process, the ones that are jumping through the hoops and doing things very medically focused and making sure people have prescriptions and doctor's notes and things like that, those are the ones that are continuing to do business. They have shut down a lot already of dispensaries, but it's still, like, even though they have business licenses and the city is permitting it, it's still technically illegal because dispensaries aren't selling any product from licensed producers, which legally the only way to get cannabis in Canada still right now is through a licensed producer with an ACMPR card, which you get through your doctor, and you have to, and they can only sell online. There's no LPs that have storefronts, so it's like every dispensary is still illegal, which is crazy.
So how many licensed producers are there in Canada now?
I think there's more now because they're ramping up for their commercialization, right?
It's still I could be wrong on this, but I believe it's around 50-ish, like 40 to 50.
Right.
And there's within there's only like under 10 that are like actually the big guys that are really competing for the big kind of contracts and stuff like that. And in certain states or provinces, I believe it's Quebec, they've made a deal with 3 of them that they're only going to get cannabis from them for the whole province. And it's like,
wow.
Yeah.
Talk about monopoly.
I know. And that's the crazy part is, like, yes, we're getting legalization, but it's so strict right now. And like the first wave that they're putting out is they're just handing out cards to people that have enough money to play in this area. And it's sad because the entire industry was built on not that.
Well, and that's a common theme, like even with, say, like cryptocurrencies, is like they want to, when there's a disruptive technology or disruptive, when
innovation of some type.
Yeah, innovation or some sort of mega change, like, cannabis legalization or digital cryptocurrencies, once they kind of catch wind that this is going to be huge, then they start to make it really difficult for anyone that doesn't have over $1 million to like make it substantially, you know what I mean? Like through these license processes, and like it's just this hyper regulation thing. And don't get me wrong, you need to have some degree of regulation, but I don't know. It's just this process of like they box it in, and then now it's going to be super hard for anyone else to really kind of make a significant life out of it. Like the rich will already capitalize off it on the mega millions,
Yeah.
I don't know.
And that's what you're seeing right now as well. Like a couple of the big guys like Aurora, they go public and raise all this money, and then they just start buying up all the other companies. And and there's a lot of like oil money that's getting put into it now. And, people that are in these large industries and just playing the stock market are just dumping their money into cannabis because it's the return, like the stocks are just getting so overinflated. It's wild, but it'll all balance out. It's still the kind of pre-legalization right now.
Do you have any idea what the the yearly what's the yearly sales revenue coming in for cannabis, like in Canada or North America? Do you have any idea? Do they have estimates of what that is? Like, what is it in Colorado?
They do. I don't have those.
Colorado is already it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a bunch. It's
you could probably Google
in the
that
hundreds
if you really
of millions,
want to find out.
For sure. But it's projected to get up into like the tens of billions of dollars within the next few years. Like by 2020, they're estimating in the like I think it's in like the 20 to 50 billion range for cannabis in the States. It's huge. It's
Yeah, and it's interesting too because we know that there's this industry that's going to explode. So there's, if you're a budding entrepreneur looking for something, can you create some sort of product that will go along with this, such as the grind bar, or who else knows, or some other service like some sort of Uber weed delivery service? I don't know, whatever, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of those kind of things popping up.
Yeah.
Especially under the delivery, there was some loophole. I was reading an article about this the other day that you weren't allowed, even in the legal states, you weren't allowed to like have delivery services. You weren't allowed to like openly sell weed like that, but you could give it as gift. So people were like selling a bottle of iced tea for $50 and it got a free bag of weed with it and things like that, and deliver them wherever you want. Right. So it's like, and technically they're legal, but I heard the most extreme version of that was a $60 plastic bag. Like, literally, they're selling. That's what the ad was. They're selling a $60 Ziploc bag
full of weed.
It happened to be have a free gift of weed in it, but it's like,
wow.
What?
God bless America.
Yeah.
People will look for ways and opportunities to look for cracks in the system.
Totally.
Right? It's always going to be that way.
Especially when the system is so messed up. Like, if it wasn't that. Like, if it were just allowed, then they wouldn't have to go through all these crazy things, If they just, I don't know. My opinion is that it should have just been made legal, have like a 19 plus category on it or whatever, and just go for it. And then it would be a bumpy road for a couple of years while we figure out, because there are like, I think we need to have some regulation, especially around edibles and dosage and things like that. But like,
they say
it's not going to hurt anyone. At the end of the day, some people might have a bad time or miss a day of work because they get too high or something. But like, there's never been a documented case of anyone dying from overdosing on cannabis.
Definitely
ever.
Not. I think that I've seen some stuff around it not being good for brain development for younger people. So it's like they say there's some sort of I don't know, some negative side effect from it.
Yeah, but again, if you have like a 19 plus and it's just sold anywhere that, cigarettes and alcohol are sold, or like have people like in dispensaries, make sure they card people,
Yeah.
That's what most of them do. Even the ones like Cannabis Culture, which is pretty near here, that openly sell to anyone that wants to buy, and they're not like hiding that. They're also the only ones that have gotten busted, like on a big scale, but because of that. But they still card people, and they don't sell to minors. It's like they still have that base level of like, it's the common understanding that it's not the best for kids. That being said, I grew up in Whistler like most of my adult life skiing, and I've seen a lot of kids that smoked a lot of weed and did really well, especially in sports and things like that, because not like recommending that kids do, but I've seen kids that did really well with their lives despite the fact that they were smoking
Sure.
weed.
Well, I mean, we can put some of those negative, lazy pothead stereotypes to rest now. I think that's been proven by a lot of people.
Yeah, it's not the weed, it's the person. You
Yeah.
know, if you're a lazy slob that doesn't want to do anything, then weed is just a nice thing to do if you're not doing anything. You know, it makes movies and video games fun endlessly. You know, whereas like if you're someone that's going to get up and do shit, you're going to get up and do shit if you're smoking weed or if you're not. Like when I use THC products myself, which is pretty rarely myself these days, it just really helps me tap into creativity and like journal and, you know, brainstorm and come up with new ideas, and then I need to like be grounded and get stuff done.
Yeah. And not that I'm a huge advocate of this anymore, but I used to be a little bit, and now I don't. But like Joe Rogan famously gets really, really high before he floats. I personally don't do that anymore. I just don't need it. I feel like
also
the floats
before his podcast
and before his podcast. Like he's an animal. Like he'll blast himself and have a podcast with Sam Harris somehow and be able to have a conversation. It's pretty amazing, actually. Yeah. But I find that I used to do it, and it used to help me, I'd say, relax in the tank and really just tune into my body and sensation and that sort of thing. But I don't do it anymore. I find that just the float on its own, because I guess maybe I'm more accustomed to going deeper on it. I just don't use it, and I still have magical experiences. But I know some people do. We have it on our waiver saying that you are not on any substances when you go into the tank. So, you know, we have our
I wonder what
covered.
the percentage of people that is.
I mean, I'm sure. I'm sure. I imagine it's slipped past us. But here's the thing: if somebody was like totally like if we knew, like we wouldn't let them float. That's the thing. But for the most part, I mean, people have definitely experimented, I'm sure.
I know I have.
Yeah. But I just want to switch gears a little bit and talk about.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, we can talk about that all day for sure. Maybe we'll get back into it. It might flow there, but talk about the entrepreneurial journey. And it's kind of ironic. Mike and I have joked about this, and a few other people joked about it, that you named it the Grind Bar, and you have been literally grinding it out for the past how long? How many year plus? How long has it been?
It's been about 2 years since I first kind of like got the idea. It's been about a year and a little over a year since it was the Grind Bar.
Yeah.
There was like a couple other things. Same well, this will lead into the discussion is entrepreneurial. Especially when you're going with the lean model, you don't always know what your end product is going to be when you start. Like my first product was actually a completely different recipe with THC and CBD because I like having edibles for hiking and things like that. And I wanted to create something like that because there wasn't any healthy edibles out there. It was all just sugar and weed and really high dosage of THC. So I made a very low THC and CBD kind of edible that was good for going on adventures, basically.
What was that like?
It was great.
Yeah, sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was. So I made that, and then I wanted something that I could eat while I was out, that I wasn't going to keep getting higher from.
Right.
It was going to keep fueling me, but not make me higher. So that was why I made the Grind Bar, and then I wanted to. Another part of the entrepreneurial journey is focusing on one thing and taking it to the finish line, and not getting distracted with shiny object syndrome, because it's interesting. Like a lot of people are the more job mentality where they just they want a stable, safe place to give them a paycheck and make sure that they're going to have their needs met forever. But once you step outside of that box, you kind of start to look at all of these possible opportunities you could take on. And it's a really common mistake that people get in is they'll start something and they'll go along a little bit and it doesn't just win instantly. So they try something else and try something else and try something else, or try multiple things at the same time. And I'd heard from a lot of people that was not the best idea. So I wanted to do one thing and do it well. And that's why I chose the Grind Bar to go.
Right. And I was kind of setting up this question a little bit, but I've seen some of the struggles of the Grind Bar and the ups and downs, and you've been very candid with me, obviously, because I'm a part owner of it. But, it would have been a lot easier for you to throw in the towel and be like, I don't want to do this anymore. So what has been your motivation that's kept you going?
Just it's a knowing that if I keep going, I'm going to get there. It's so ingrained in me that I can do it and that I have the skill to do it, and that this product is going to win, and CBD in general, especially with all the other, we've got new flavors and other products coming out in the short term, but it's I think part of it for me is a lot of times before it was more like this idea that I was just working on an idea, and I never did the whole MVP and sell something and get response. And when you're in that phase of you don't know if it's going to work, you don't know if people are going to pay for it, you have no idea, it's really easy to let it go at that point because it's just an idea in your head. But for me with Grind Bar, so many people just love it. Even today when I came in, you have a new girl working behind the desk, and I was like, oh, this is what I do, and this is what we're doing today. We're going to the podcast, and she's like, oh my God, I love your bars. I've had a bunch of them, and they're so good.
Yeah.
And I hear that so many times that I couldn't stop. I know that it's working. I know that people love it. I know that it helps them with whatever they're trying to get done using it, and I get enough feedback from people that it's just a matter of time. It hasn't tipped yet, but it's I know that if I just keep moving in that direction, it's going to. And I have gone I'm way too far down the entrepreneurial path to just get a job somewhere, fight for anything less than creating that sense of freedom for myself.
And one thing I wanted to say to you is it's not there's a shiny side to entrepreneurship, but there's another side which people don't usually see, and it is ridiculous sometimes.
Hard work.
So I could totally understand a lifestyle choice of working a job, and if somebody's doing that, so be it. Like, as long as you're
Totally.
happy within your life, right? It's like if that works better for you and you don't have to worry about your business all the time or whatever, or there's so many stresses that come along with it, and you rather just go out and spend time with your family or whatever. I mean, that's totally valid.
And this is something I think that actually doesn't get talked about enough is most people get into the entrepreneurial space because they're seeking freedom. They're like, I want to not have a boss. I don't want to have to follow other people's rules. I want to be able to create my own structure, and I want to like make all this money and have employees and not have to work anymore. But like the reality is it takes a long time to get to that point. And most people don't have what it takes to work like countless hours for very little, if any, pay. Like I didn't pay myself anything at all for the first year. I'm starting to now a little bit, but it's like, it's still not anywhere close to what I'd be getting paid if I were working this many hours in a job.
And it's rare too that a lot of times people will, in a sense, I don't like saying this, but they'll buy themselves a job, for lack of a better way of saying it, where if they weren't actively working in the business, then it wouldn't work, it wouldn't run. And there's that whole phrase of like, you want to try to open or start a business or a venture of some kind that you can work on, not in.
Yeah.
Because if it requires you to be there day to day, you're just capped. Like if you're working an 8-hour day, like 5-6 days a week minimum, then you're stuck.
Totally. And that's classic, especially in things like trades as well, where you're making like $20 an hour working for some dude, and he's billing $50 an hour for your time, and you're like, man, I'm sick of making other people money. But like, you don't see what goes into the other parts of that, like all the back end and the getting jobs, and and that's what I wanted to touch on is there actually is a lot of freedom. There can be a lot of freedom in having a job because you have the freedom of your weekends, and you have the freedom of when you're finished, and you get to like turn off. And that is a downside of the entrepreneurial path. And Tim Ferriss talks about this sometimes, like rates of depression and things like that and anxiety are way higher in entrepreneurs because like it's hard to turn off. It's hard to like put everything on the side because there's always more things that can be getting done.
Yeah.
And
always. It's infinite. You could work all the time if you want to.
And some people do, especially if you follow Gary Vee and all those guys, like that's what they're like, work 24, 27 hours a day, every day, and it's like,
it appears to be.
That does help people get to the top in a lot of times, but I
What are
bet
you
that's putting a lot of
sacrificing
people equally, if not more people in the hospital too, from like
Potentially, sure.
stress related crap, so.
Yeah, I've been playing with this idea a little bit, the idea of a myth of freedom and how much freedom we actually have anyways. Because just being alive, you have restrictions. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. It's like
Here, for sure.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Well, in existence, you know what I mean? It's just like, Jordan Peterson talks a little bit about this, how he's like, what's the main difference between a human being and a God? Or what does a God not have that a human being does have? And he's like, limitation. Mm-hmm. And he talks about how having that limitation actually creates a whole set of circumstances which you can play in and grow. And if you don't have that limitation, and that's the one thing about it too, is like people, they get so caught up in this idea of freedom, like you got to have freedom, but what do you really? No one's actually free. Yeah. No one's free. So there is like, within your job, even if you were working a job 9 to 5, you have a certain set of rules you have to follow, but within that, there's potentially a lot of room for creativity too.
Yeah. Well, and it's that whole, it's like the masculine feminine conversation there too. It's like, feminine and flow needs to have a masculine structure to flow through. It doesn't work if you just have unlimited space and creativity, then nothing happens. You're just like spinning in the air.
It's true. And that's the big difference between liberals and conservatives, really. Because liberals are typically very high in trait openness, and conservatives are usually higher in trait conscientiousness. So it's like the liberals will go and be like, let's open everything up and it's free and blah, blah, blah. And the conservatives are like, wait, hold on a second there. We got to make sure things are okay. So that's why, traditionally you have the two parties, which are keeping each other in check. So it's like one doesn't just like, if there's complete openness, everything would just fall apart. But if there's complete like rules and regulations, you wouldn't be able to do anything. So it's like finding that balance, which is like a big part of a conversation that's happening, today. Yeah. With the left and the right not talking to each other. But I don't know if we want to go into that at all today. But yeah.
Well, but it's interesting too, just how you need both, like you're saying. They got to balance each other out. and different people are going to be stronger in different areas. So there's not one that's better than the other, and it's really kind of being aware of what your natural tendencies are and where you kind of excel at as well. Some people thrive when they have some more structure and they can follow the plan and they just get shit done, where other people like really struggle with that, and they need that they need those shackles off a little bit. Not that they're shackles. I shouldn't even use that word. You know what I mean? Because there's like this fine balance that both exist, both are needed. And the open-mindedness one might create the business, but then you need, conservative ones to run it, because it's really hard for open people to be like,
That's the truth
to be
too,
consistent and like to do the daily systematic work that makes something thrive. Like it's such a crazy dynamic.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest pieces, like back to the entrepreneurship conversation, is I think one of the most important skills to develop in yourself is self-awareness. And that's not just me, that's Gary Vee. That's like all these guys are talking about these days. Like, you need to know yourself specifically for that reason, because if you're a type that thrives on being creative and doing this stuff, don't start a business that requires, don't be an accountant or something, like find places. And even once you start a business, like, you're usually going to do most of the work at the beginning, but then by getting to know yourself better, you know which pieces you really love to do and you could do for hours that don't really feel like work. And the pieces that you hate, like once you start making money, you can pay people to do those pieces you don't like anymore.
And they're probably better at them anyways. So,
exactly. 100%. You outsource the things that you're not good at and that you don't like doing. Because classically, or I don't know if that's whatever, you're usually not going to be that good at the things you don't like. Sometimes you'll, have things that you're decent at, but you don't enjoy doing. But you're never going to be excellent at something you hate
Well, you
doing.
won't be as happy, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
If you're doing a job that you really don't want to do, it's going to affect your overall life and mood.
Totally. Like, we spend, I don't even know what the stats are, but like the majority of our waking time working for most people. So it's, if you were doing something you hate all of that time, why on earth would you do that? Like, you're going to have a terrible life.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, well, there's so many like little divergences we can get into today, but let's just keep it focused on you, because sometimes these conversations with someone who's more of a friend, they become more like flowy and less interviewy. But what are some things that are really important to you these days? What's really big on your radar?
Couple that come to mind. One is diet. I've been like really trying to dial in my personal diet. I've just recently switched to doing, this isn't going to necessarily be permanent, but doing a keto diet. So eating, I've been vegetarian, I've been vegan, I've tried all sorts of different things, but I'm actually eating a lot of meat these days. And most of my meals are primarily meat with added fat and a little bit of veggies. And it's been great so far. I've noticed just my cravings for sugar have gone way down already in the first week. My energy is a lot more stable, and I don't have the crazy just swings of like productivity and crash. So it's and I didn't eat that much sugar before either. It was just even just my bars. I've actually stopped eating my normal bars now, but we are developing keto bars that I've been eating for the last week too. So it's I think part with that as well. So that's a big one, diet, and like really tailoring that in for myself.
Can I ask a quick question? Like, so one of the things that when I was kind of introduced to you through online was following you along. You did a water fast. So you're definitely someone that's not afraid to try like kind of just, more extreme and out there techniques and disciplines and things like that. But that was one that I thought was like really fascinating to see you go through this water fast. Can you kind of take us through what that was and what you felt from it, and like, just whatever you got from that and why you did it?
Sure.
I've always want to dive into that a little bit with you.
So it was a cool experience. It was inspired by the yoga studio that I was kind of practicing with at the time, or school. And they had a spring cleanse that they put on. It was a month-long cleanse of 2 weeks of basically raw vegan, a week of just a juice fast, like nothing but vegetable juices, like cold pressed juices, and then back to a week of the raw vegan. And one thing about me is I usually like to do things a little more extreme than other people. So, and I knew a guy that had done a water fast in the school as well and had talked very highly of it, just very cleansing. There are a lot of like amazing health benefits that come from fasting, and I just wanted to see if I could do it as well. That's always been a big piece of most of the adventures I've gone on. It's just curiosity to see if, like, pushing my own limits to see what I'm.
Cold water swimming.
Including the cold water swimming, including the, all the skiing and the jumping off crazy cliffs, the biking from here to Mexico, almost like, well, San Diego, but a lot of almost Mexico. I've always gone on adventures, and I've always enjoyed that, just pushing my own limits and seeing what I'm capable of. So the fast was one of just seeing what happens. Like, what happens if you just stop eating? So I did 10 days of nothing but water.
Would you still excrete?
Nope.
Interesting.
Nothing going in, nothing coming out.
Right.
No, at least for a while. I was
you pee
excreting
a
like
lot.
3 days afterwards.
You pee a lot.
Yeah.
But no. But with that in mind, I was actually doing self-administered enemas every day through that.
You just take it up another level every time, eh, Dave Weale?
Well, for a reason though, because when you're doing, like, one of the things that happens in fasting is after 3 days you go into ketosis, like real heavy, which is, the whole foundation of keto diet is teaching your body to run off of your fat. And that's why we store fat in the first place. It's stored energy to be used in periods of famine. And so our bodies are built to fast, because way back in the winters, we didn't have fresh fruits and vegetables in the grocery store down the street. So you switch over to burning off fat, and you start living off of the fat you have stored in you. And when that happens, a lot of toxins are released. A lot of toxins come out of the fat cells, and they get, like, your bowels are the main way that things are sent out of your system. And if you're not eating and putting food through your system, then they can just all kind of accumulate in there, and it can actually be really bad for you. So that's why the daily enemas.
You gotta keep the flow of excretion going.
All
right?
those toxins that are coming out of your body, you're just flushing them out on a regular basis.
Yeah. Right.
Now, because we're getting a little short on time, but I wanted to dive into a few other topics real quickly.
Sure.
And one would be men's work, because I know you've been big into the men's work community for a while now.
It's been huge.
Man Talks, then Samurai Brotherhood. We were all part of Samurai at one point. I'm formerly a member. We have a current member sitting in the lounge right now, Mr. Adam McCoy. What's he part of? Ray Brennan Squad. Titan.
Yes.
Anyways, can you talk a little bit about that and how it's benefited your life, just working with men? Like, I'm currently part of the Man Talks Mastermind, so I still have men's work in my life.
Yep.
How has that benefited you?
In more ways than I can count. It's actually been very transformative for me. I would say when I started, like, I got into the spiritual path before, so I'd done a lot of meditation, and I was, a kind of a bit of a snag, sensitive new age guy, and
that's a good term.
You never knew that. Yeah.
Sensitive new age guy,
snags, very much so that, like, before I got into doing the grind bar and that whole chapter, I was trying to launch a retreat center and teach meditation and all this stuff, but wasn't focused at all on making money, which was what collapsed, surprisingly. Men's work was what helped me get grounded. It helped me get in touch with my anger. It helped me believe in myself. It helped me just stay the course. Like I was saying before, it's very important in any kind of entrepreneurship or just life to, like, see something through and keep moving in the same direction. And the men's work was huge for that. It really, like, to backtrack a little bit, my father left before I was born, so I never had a relationship with him. I did have a stepdad, but he was, his father had died when he was super young, so he didn't really have a strong male role model either. And he was kind of my mom was like the man and woman of the house in a way. And I didn't have that strong male role model to kind of guide me and teach me about, like, what it means to be a man, so the men's work was huge for that. It really helped heal that kind of father wound, and just, it strengthened me a lot.
One thing that's, Robert Glover, Norm's a nice guy, really good podcast. We have it. If you scroll back, you can find that one. He talks a lot about how, not having a father in a boy's life is such a really, it's a major hindrance. Like, it's going to affect a lot of boys negatively if they grow up without a father presence, which is so common because since the Industrial Revolution, fathers have basically been off working in factories or whatever, and not raising their boys. And one thing that we got from the men's work is that you can, if you didn't have that male presence and that real male role model in the form of your father, you could actually get that through other men in groups like that.
Exactly. Yeah, I projected so much of my father's stuff onto Nick, who was the co-captain of our
There's
squad.
some conflict there for a while.
Oh, we butted heads like you wouldn't believe. Also, sidebar, I don't want to, like, my stepdad was awesome. He was like, I did learn a lot from him.
Sure.
He was super stable, and it was a great man to have in my life. And I was a little shit when I was a kid, so he was still like, "You're not my dad," and like, I didn't see him as that growing up, so I wasn't teachable by any stretch. But sidebar, love you, Dad. But yeah, I totally healed a lot of that through men's work and through getting to interact with these other guys, and just a lot of the processes and a lot of the just getting in touch with my anger. Anger was something I was extremely afraid of in myself.
As a snag.
That was one of the benefits of growing up with, like, or not benefits, one of the side effects, I guess, of having mostly just a female role model was, like, I was very encouraged to be nice and to, like, not fight and to, just
be non-confrontational.
Exactly. And I just wasn't at all. But when you're not confrontational. Highly agreeable, as Jordan Peterson talks about.
Feminine trait.
Yeah, it's
more feminine trait.
Totally. And I self-attributed as a very feminine man for a long time. I basically lost touch with my masculine side. It was only through this work and through getting in touch with my anger and just, like, letting myself get that and just practice that with other men that I built that up in myself. I built up my belief in myself that I could not that, like, don't fuck with me energy,
which is huge.
It's just so important if you want to create anything in the world.
Well, fortunately for me, I always fall in the 10th percentile or lower in trait agreeableness, so I've never really had that problem. And there's
even if you are,
and
I remember you saying sometimes, like, even if you agree, you would be like, nope.
Yeah, sometimes I would be like that.
Your default is to not agree, which is like.
Yeah, it's a challenging. Like, in fact, one of my Enneagram types is the challenger as well. So it's part of my personality, which is, you can argue if that's good or bad. There's probably pros and cons to it. But I was just curious if you could. This is just moving on again, just to keep it moving. Are there any resources that you have that have been really useful and instrumental in your life that you can share with people today?
Resources,
books, groups, whatever whatever has been you found be really invaluable for you.
Meditation. Above all, like, my mind runs to all these things, but if you're not in Vancouver, a lot of them don't apply. But meditation is the one thing that anyone can use anywhere, and it requires nothing except shutting your mouth, shutting your eyes, just being still and listening to what's going on in your head.
And you've done a couple of Vipassanas as well, right?
Yeah, I've done 2 10-day silent meditation retreats, which were huge, and a lot of practice outside of that as well.
Why has that benefited you specifically?
It ties back to the self-awareness piece more than anything. It's, you're learning about yourself. You're learning what makes you tick, what lights you up, what pisses you off. It's just, you really get to know that voice in your head. And also through that, learn that voice isn't actually you. Like, the you is the observer, if you get into the whole thing, right? Like, it's what's listening to those thoughts and choosing whether or not to act on them or believe them or whatever. So you just get to know that voice, and you get a lot better at being in control of your emotions and in control of those, like, thoughts that just pop into your head, whether or not they're valid or good or, like, helping you in the moment. So it's definitely, I would say, above all else, it's one of the most important things to just for anyone to take on.
I think we can leave it at that one as meditation, because it is so huge. Like, if you can really develop it as a practice, like with Mindful Mass, we did this 30-day meditation challenge, and it was the first time I actually meditated consistently every single day. And I would meditate in the float tank or sporadically here and there, but developing the practice of it was a completely different thing and super beneficial.
Yeah. Can I add one more?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is fear. Fear is the best tool that you can have to guide you in your life if you're interested in growing. Like you mentioned earlier, that I'm someone who you've seen always striving to be growing, to be getting better, and fear is your best guidepost for areas to grow. Like, I actually set an intention for myself one year at New Year's the first year I moved to Vancouver, actually, which was to get uncomfortable as much as I could. And like discomfort and fear are very similar. Like those places where you're like, ooh, I don't want to go there. If you go there, you're going to open up into some new like area, new understanding, or new like self-discovery. Just especially
I agree.
around failure and entrepreneurship, tying back to there, it's like
Fear,
you need to not be afraid to fail.
right. Like fear absolutely does benefit. There's a lot of benefit. Like fear has such a bad rap. Like, oh, if you were acting out of love and not fear, you wouldn't have done that bad thing. Well, maybe, but there's also a lot of factors. Like fear keeps you alive. There's a lot of times when fear will save your life, or alerts you to things that you should be paying attention to, or potentially alert you to something where there's an opportunity for you to grow. Yeah. So it's like people demonize fear, but I don't necessarily think it's demonized. It's like it's just a part of life, and that's sort of the ego or the mind saying that fear is bad or anger is bad. It's
Well,
that's
just
not
people
the case.
avoiding it and not understanding it. Anger's bad if you never let yourself get angry until the point where it fucking blows up and you hurt someone. Fear is bad if it forces you to stay in your basement and never see the light of day because you're so afraid of people. But when you get to know them and get to understand those parts of yourself, you're moving forward, you're growing.
And you could say bad, but you also could say it's like, sometimes it's like people need to have that meltdown or eruption or breakdown before they hit, if they hit that rock bottom, sometimes that is the biggest catalyst for change. Or it's like when you're in the hardest and darkest times and you're like, and then one day you just decide like, I'm not doing that anymore. Yeah. So it's like, that's why it's like you got to let people have their process too. It's like just let them go through their thing and let them experience it. And then even if they do hit rock bottom, as long as they're not in danger of some sort, I would say like that could be a huge catalyst for change and growth.
Totally.
Yeah. Anyways, is there anything else you'd like to get out there today? How can people get in touch with you?
There is, but how can people get in touch with me? Just check out our Instagram at the Grind Bar on Instagram, our website, thegrindbar.com. You can find us there. Info at the Grind Bar if you want to shoot us an email. Those are all great ways to get in touch. Those all come to me, so it's easy to find me there. I'm personally on Instagram at Dave_Weale, and so you can hit me up on there too. The one other thing I wanted to mention though, that's been a few questions ago, you asked what are the big things in my life that are kind of going on and things I'm growing in. And the other big one for me is relationship. I'd been single for 2 years through this whole Grind Bar development because I was like super, super focused on business and just making that work. And over the last 4 months, I've entered into a relationship, and it's been one of the most profound teachers that like just, I attracted. Like I'd always dreamed of this like amazing, beautiful partner that was like killing it in life and inspired me and, awesome in bed and all this stuff. And then I found it. It's been fucking awesome and crazy challenging. And it's exactly what I wanted, which is like such a crazy teacher. So
you find you're growing a lot because of that?
Oh my God, so much. It's intense. But so it's, it's like the careful what you ask for.
Yeah.
Because,
man, relationships are like one of the most potent sources of like reflection back at you.
Yeah.
They're so like,
Oh, man.
it's like, and it's nonstop. And that's part of the benefit of like monogamy and being in a long-term relationship and that sort of thing. Cause it's like, yes, there's a lot of challenges with that, but man, it can be such a great avenue and tool for growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and it's huge. So I wanted to give a little shout out to her too, to Brooke. She's phenomenal and runs an amazing company called Dancing with Life, where they teach dance in schools and teach kids about like self-acceptance and anti-bullying and all this stuff like snuck into just having fun and playing and moving their bodies, and it's rad.
Awesome, man. Very cool. Well, you know what? Honestly, I think we should do this again sometime because it was really fun. And, one thing Brian Rose taught us when we went to London was like do not exhaust your guest. Like leave people, wanting a little bit more and leave more on the table to talk about next time. So I think we can end it at that. But cool. Man, thanks so much for coming in and sharing your story. And it was a long time coming, but I could see you being one of our regular pop-in guests at Vancouver Real since you're local and we're all here doing our things in the city. Yeah. So thanks a lot for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching.
And, as usual, if you like what you heard today, if you leave us a little review, a rating, a like, a comment, some sort of engagement is really helpful. They call that sort of the new currency, if you will. Getting a little bit of engagement goes a long way on social media. So if you could help us out and help us get found, that would be great. Of course, if you want to float, go to floathouse.ca, use the promo code VancouverReal, get a 20% discount on a single float. Come up to some of our events, Mindful Mass or the Vancouver Real meetups. Come to Float House and buy a grind bar or some Brain Evolve as well. So I think that covers the spectrum right now.
All your needs are met. All of them.
All of them.
Just come and hang out with us.
That's it.
And
we have
thanks
the
everybody.
answers, people. We are the answer.
Andy, what did I talk about saying on air?
Oh, sorry, I should have said that.
We're just students.
Inner voice.
There you go. That's right. That's right. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us. Until next time.
To whatever is. I botched it.
That's okay. To whatever is.